Well, hello, I am Stacy Kazanchuk and I am Genev's Director of Health Coaching. And we are back with our webinar series with Dr. Erika Vella on the microbiome and menopause. And with a topic today with the holidays not that far away, Halloween is over and Thanksgiving and Christmas are right behind. We are going to talk today on how holiday eating can impact the microbiome and also give you some strategies to help during this time, whether it's with stress management, eating choices, all different things. They all come together, and we're going to discuss that today. So welcome, Erika. Again, great to always have you here with us. And for those individuals that might be listening to this podcast for the first time, can you please share with them your background and the work that you do around the microbiome and also your work as a bariatric surgeon?
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. Yes, my day job is a weight loss or bariatric metabolic surgery. So I'm a surgeon, and my love for the gut microbiomes really started when I was in medical school, when I started coming down with my own situational anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, constipation, diarrhea, etc. And I found functional medicine, and through that whole process was really inspired to kind of keep going deeper. So since that day in 2010, I have not stopped reading the science, and tell you what, it is just building and building and building. And what I love so much about the gut microbiome is that it is this really central point in the human body that connects every single system that even in 2010 was taught to me in a very isolated way. So your hormones are intimately connected to your immune system, which is intimately connected to your mental health, which is connected to your nervous system and your ability to perceive danger. And anyway, the gut brain axis is one of my most favorite subjects. I teach which is a passion project of mine. I teach a gut brain axis workshop, really highlighting not only my own personal experience of how gut imbalances can lead to a increased sense of the world is falling down around you, even though it might not be, or maybe on the contrary, maybe it actually literally is. But, just acknowledging that how our diet and our body and our nervous system and these organisms that live in and outside of us, how everything works together to make this earthly experience so special. So that's a little bit about me and my love for the gut microbiome.
Excellent. And you mentioned the gut brain axis. If anyone's interested in learning more in depth on that, obviously they can go to your website in your course. But we also did a recording. Our last episode was on the gut brain axis. So check out genev.com and we have that posted there as well. And so before we jump into today's topic, I always think it's a good idea to get us all on the foundation, our same place in terms of what the microbiome is. So can you give a general overview for any of our listeners that this might be new or something that's pretty complex? It's always good to have a review of what we know right now.
Yeah, well, and I also think on every single episode I've explained it maybe a little bit differently or with different contexts, but basically the microbiome, which can be in your vagina, on your skin, in your mouth, in your gut, it just implies that we have this ecosystem, this population of microorganisms, micro being we have to use a microscope in order to see them, viruses, bacteria, even little single-celled little organisms. So the very first life forms that were ever present on Earth are inhabiting our bodies. Microbiome implies not just the organisms themselves, but the genes, so like the actual DNA and the function that they do in this symbiotic relationship for us. And symbiotic means it's mutually beneficial. So we have these organisms that live in our body. They are there to keep us healthy, and we are there to provide a home for them. And so when we look at health, whether it's going through menopause, going through chemo and radiation, like whatever it might be, all we're trying to do is really try to create this mutually beneficial existence between these microorganisms in our body and us as humans.
I love that balance piece, which and that symbiotic relationship I think is going to come up a lot in today's topic. And one thing we know with the holidays, there tends to be more increase in sugar intake, increase in alcohol intake, increase in maybe saturated fat, perhaps a decrease in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, just depending on what type of holiday celebrations you have. And without a question, especially this year with the pandemic, I'm gonna bet that most all of us are going to experience some level of increased stress. So all of these things you've mentioned before on some of our webinars can disrupt the balance. Before we go into the details of these, can you just give an overview of where balance and that symbiotic relationship takes place and how some of these things might impact it?
Yeah, that's such a lovely question. So balance. These microorganisms need to exist, number one. And in order for them to exist, they have needed a certain exposure. So in order to increase our exposure to these different types of organisms, we need to eat many different types of food. And so that's important. That's important as an adult. We can also get into the nitty gritty of what it's like to develop a gut microbiome, which is really important and really hot science right now. But I know all your listeners are grown women. So we can't go back in time and undo whether or not we were breastfed or bottle fed. But now that we're adults, what we can do is we can increase the amount or the different types of plant foods that we are eating. And that is that full spectrum of many different types of vegetables, many different types of whole grains, legumes, which are beans and lentils, and cashews are legumes. These are traditionally higher fiber, higher protein sources of starches. So those types of foods really bring in not only different types of organisms, because sometimes they're actually attached to these foods themselves from the environment, so from the soil in which they came from, but also the types of fiber and the nutrients that are in those foods then feeds and perpetuates the organisms that already live in your body. So the most healthy of individuals that have been studied to date are the ones that have the highest or the most different types of bacteria in their bodies. And they call that alpha diversity. So, in that nutshell, balance is not necessarily a restrictive measure, but more in this context of like an abundant kind of mindset of, okay, I can be healthy by eating more of these things. And it doesn't mean you need to eat tons in terms of volume or calories. In fact, I don't even count calories. That's so 1990. But I like to count micronutrients and like where's my fiber coming from and how many different sources of fiber am I getting. So that's
Mhm.
diet is one. The second one that I think is often misunderstood or underrepresented has nothing to do with diet, it has everything to do with your mental headspace and your nervous system. And what I talk about in my gut microbiome workshop is that just the stress response in the body, so being activated to having excess cortisol being a stress hormone, just the very initiation of that process in our body, it's time dependent. It's supposed to come on, peak for maybe a minute or two, and then we're supposed to recover. We're never supposed to live in this perpetual fear state, which unfortunately 2020 has kind of felt like a perpetual fear state. So these hormones cause leaky gut. And leaky gut is where the gut cells themselves aren't actually sticking together and not allowing undigested food or bacteria to get across the membrane, but instead they're broken apart. And now there's physical space where undigested food, gluten being an anti-nutrient, different things like that can actually get across the cell barrier and then start interacting with your immune system in a way that can be very inflammatory.
Mhm. That's such a good point too of coming back to that gut lining and the importance of that for really separating the outside world from the inside world. Well, let's talk about some of these components first in isolation, knowing that we are gonna get to big picture because none of this exists in isolation. We know that from this year, and we know that just in terms of we eat food, we don't just eat single nutrients. But let's talk about what we know about sugar, fat, and alcohol specifically, things that typically tend to be popular around the holidays. How do these impact that gut environment and the diversity you mentioned?
They all reduce it. So, every single one of those constituents really does act to reduce diversity. Sugar, I feel like, is something that can be approached with gentleness and kindness. And again, the key word is balance, because in many of our fermented foods, different carbohydrate, which is a sugar, substrates, which just means, it's a nutritional medium, if you will. I'm kind of using science words, but that's what substrate means, is it's a nutritional medium for something to consume and then turn into biochemical compounds. But carbohydrates and sugar can actually feed many different microorganisms in a beneficial way. But there's a difference between already broken down glucose molecules, high fructose corn syrup, which is very chemically laden, and in a tipping point in which too much sugar actually decreases microbiome diversity, especially in the absence of those higher fiber plant diversity foods, and can put your gut into a state of yeast overgrowth. So if anybody's made kombucha or purchased kombucha, you look at the label, everybody knows it's a probiotic food for you and it's supposed to be good for you right now. However, kombucha is black tea fed sugar, and it's the sugar that the bacteria eats to grow and ferment and release its little bacteria babies and other healthy substrates for our body. So again, that's an example in natural fermentation where sugar is actually turned into the fuel source for these microorganisms. So a little bit of sweetness is okay. And especially the sweetness that comes naturally from plants. I would say honey is a pretty good sweetener to use. Maple syrup, pretty good sweetener to use. Dates, pretty good sweetener to use in terms of, can your microbiome recognize it as food? If your microbiome can recognize it as food, then modest amounts are going to have a health promoting benefit. But if we're doing cane, straight white sugar that's been sprayed with tons of glyphosate, high fructose corn syrup in prepackaged processed foods, your microbiome does not know what to do with that. It actually kills the diversity of your bacteria unless you are also simultaneously eating those high fiber foods. So that's kind of my kind of take on sugar. And I think we can explore that further if you would like. Fat, same kind of thing. So too much saturated fat typically comes from animal products. And this is, one of the things that plant-based diets and vegans and vegetarians alike love about their plant-based diets, is that it's so low in saturated fat. Saturated fat is just not a substrate for growing bacteria. So saturated fat, it comes from, animal protein, muscle. I'm thinking about like steak and like ground beef and things like that. It's never really been a food for very many different types of bacteria. So if you have a diet that's too high in saturated fat, the expectation is that your gut microbiome diversity will go down. That is totally fine in a temporary setting, or potentially totally normal, as in our Eskimos. So there's been a lot of studies looking at them. How are they so healthy? How did they survive, right? They were eating nothing but like seals, whales, cold water fish. The trick is they weren't just eating their muscle. They were eating their liver, their heart, their kidneys, their bone marrow. So when you eat all of the organs of an animal, you also get all of the antioxidants you also get from vegetables. So
All right.
think that, again, there's not one size fits all. There's a full spectrum here. But when you tip the scale, too much sugar, too much fat, too much animal fat, not enough plant fiber, antioxidants and stuff to kind of make up for it, then it's like you're just tipping the scale a little too far in a direction that isn't necessarily going to be favorable.
Excellent. Yeah. And again, it comes back, like you said, the balance piece. The body likes to be in balance, homeostasis, that state of balance within the body, whether it be body temperature or our microbiome, or just when we're looking at how do we balance all these types of foods that are in our food system. And when I'm working with clients, through Genève, that a lot of times women are saying, well, should I get rid of all sugar? Should I get rid of all fat? And we have to remind ourselves that our bodies are resilient. Our bodies can handle these things. Just because something isn't ideal to have all the time for every meal doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, that you can't include it. And I love your point too of balancing it out. Of if you are going to have the packaged processed cookies, which we all have, we all do, then how do you also balance out and making sure that you're getting a lot of those other plant-based foods? So it's a and versus a either or.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think um, when we try to just balance our body, then we can let go of our fear and attachment
Mhm,
over restriction and
mhm.
over like weight gain too. Because
Yeah.
our bodies really are designed to maintain. They
Mhm,
don't they aren't designed to go to all extremes of gaining lots of weight very quickly, losing it very quickly, restricting no protein to 100% protein.
mhm,
We see a lot of all or nothing attitudes,
mhm,
especially in my day job, working with people with obesity and talking about these food relationships and stuff. And our culture has not been our commercial culture, which unfortunately is so many of our awareness with nutrition kind of comes from this commercialization of food. And I grew up watching my mom on a diet all the time.
mhm,
So there wasn't a really healthy relationship with body or a healthy relationship with what does my body need.
mhm.
So if you're pooping every day comfortably and you're drinking enough water, and if you can add some healthiness to your breakfast, add some healthiness to your lunch, add some healthiness to your dinner, I think you're going to be pretty well balanced. And I'd say another tip for the holidays would be when we're constantly preparing food, like say on Thanksgiving, there's just food out all day long. And that act of continually grazing, you're constantly stimulating the hormones of your metabolism to store, store, store. And so that can be very challenging to the body. I think if you're eating healthy food, sure, that can feed a gut microbiome, but even then, you're still hormonally driving your body to store. So you might have disrupted sleep. You might gain, a little bit of weight pretty quickly if you have like all of Thanksgiving break where you're just eating all day long. So really try to go into the holiday with some thought and attention to adding legumes to your favorite Thanksgiving meals, and then trying to still honor the daily rhythm of a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner um, without a lot of grazing and snacking to the best of your ability.
That's such a good point because a lot of times I think I'll have clients say, "Well, I'm not going to eat all day until dinner," and so whatever that dinner may be, and if there's preparation, then all of a sudden there is that grazing, or they sit down to this gigantic meal and feel this all or nothing urge of like, "This is the only day I can have all this food," and ends up either being really uncomfortable or eating way more than they would have, and then it takes out that enjoyment factor. They feel uncomfortable. They feel like they have to get all of these things that they never eat. It really takes away from that mind body connection.
Yeah, and that's such a ubiquitous thing. Um, I feel like I've spent Thanksgiving with plenty of friends as families and my own family and now my husband's family, although my husband's family is Australian, but you get the idea. It's like there's still this cultural so there's a very a natural human instinct to like we love the food party. We love the festival, right? Like, and we've been doing as humans for like millennia. And so just this idea of all these different things and this harvest and like what we're going to be eating and what we're going to be celebrating, our bodies are totally made for like the 1 or 2 days a year where we get to festivize our harvest.
Yeah.
So like there's also balance in that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, giving yourself permission of it's okay to have more than you would on this day, and being mindful and thoughtful around it so that you can truly enjoy it if you are going to. Um, well, let's also talk about alcohol. You mentioned the fat and sugar having an impact on the microbiome. We know a little bit, or, on occasions, totally fine. We want to avoid that being the only source of nutrients for the gut. Alcohol comes up, one, because it does increase during the holidays. And then also, two, I get questions of like, oh, wait, fermented foods are good for the gut. Isn't alcohol fermented? Is more better? So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe even, how's beer compared to wine, compared to distilled spirits?
Yeah.
Lots of questions there.
Yeah, there are lots of questions. Again, I think really listening to your body is really important. So when I was really sick in medical school and I had a lot of gastrointestinal dysfunction, I was not detoxifying alcohol very well. And I would have maybe one glass of wine, one beer, whatever. I was only 24, so I was still drinking quite a bit. And one drink would literally hurt and I'd feel it in my body for 3 days.
Mm.
So, at some extremes of gut dysfunction, I had yeast overgrowth, I had a parasite, I nutrition, there was no balance in my body at that time. Um, it's interesting because just the act of my liver trying to break down alcohol kind of ruined me, you know? So, to fast forward to now where I don't have any of those issues, um, alcohol can still be, it can still tie up your liver. It can still preoccupy your liver. So, alcohol has this very unique ability to not only carry a higher caloric content per gram. So, 1 gram of alcohol is equivalent to 7 calories. So, in that regard, it's very similar to fat in terms of the other ways that our bodies process or store energy. But also, as your liver is busy trying to metabolize alcohol, it makes it impossible for your body to fat burn.
Yeah,
It,
that's
it
right.
blunts off that process. So,
Mhm.
so alcohol consumption in any amount of excess that is preoccupying your liver. So if your liver's not working very well, or et cetera, then you can expect to gain weight very easily from alcohol consumption. And I know that at least in the work that I do, weight gain, weight regain, weight loss is on the tip of everybody's tongue. So I encouraged people to think about what their goals are for their overall health, to still enjoy it, but to maybe sip it very slowly, nurse
Mhm.
it along. Again, alcohol has also been around for a very, very long time. Yes, it is one of the first fermented things that we have. I think, honey was first fermented into mead, and then grapes into wine. And they do use yeast and bacteria to do that. However, it's difference between, again, the beginning stages of fermentation where the bacteria are still active. So the bacteria will be active in the beginning, but then at some point the bacteria die because the alcohol content is so high that they stop fermenting. And so that's where it's no longer a fermented food. It's no longer a living food. And it kind of does take away some of that health benefit. That doesn't mean that there's not some remnants of what we call a short chain fatty acid or a byproduct. And it is believed that certain wines, like red wine, are very potent in antioxidants. So there can be a benefit, but likewise, anything in excess, there can be a detriment. So again, balance comes into play.
Mhm.
Um, Difference between beer, between wine, again, it comes down to substrate. So
Mhm.
substrate being that what is the nutritional food for the bacteria or the yeast to do the fermentation. Barley, which can be high in gluten. So some people opt for gluten-free beverages. Um, and but I don't know. I don't know the details of all of that. I encourage
Okay.
people to experiment with their own bodies, enjoy the day, enjoy the moment, and try to strive for balance. Definitely get more water than wine that day.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Or the alternating strategy for every glass of wine you have to get a glass of water afterwards. Some of those things, or even I have clients that really like wine spritzers. So even
Yeah.
with whether it's red wine or white wine, add a little bit of bubbly water to it. You still
Yeah.
have the taste of the wine, and then it lasts a little bit longer, and there's more hydration benefits to it.
Yeah, and I think if you're drinking slowly enough
Mhm.
where you're enjoying it, but you're not necessarily feeling intoxicated, then that's the appropriate speed for liver metabolism.
Good
If
point.
you kinda overshoot that and you're intoxicated, that means your liver is no longer keeping up with the metabolism. And so
Mm.
you can expect that, I mean, sometimes in some people, that effect of not being able to go into fat burning can last for 24 or 48 hours.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. And that's another good point too. It's so individual. So all the strategies we're recommending today are things that we're talking about. Remember that they are unique to you. Erica's mentioned a bunch of times in some of the other webinars that even your microbiome is as unique as your fingerprints. And so these are strategies to try and to think about. And then how is it going to fit for you and your lifestyle? And then with that self experimentation, you have that opportunity to know, does this work for me? How does this feel for my body? And again, that's part of that mind body connection that's important.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, with the mind body connection piece, let's talk about stress because we can't ignore that. And as you've mentioned before, that gut brain axis and the impact of our mental state, our mental space, has a system can have a systemic effect. So, can you talk about that, and then we can dive into the holiday piece of stress?
Yeah. So I think stress gets sometimes overused. So I like to, take an opportunity to kind of redefine it for the type of stressful changes that you feel in your body. So that'd be something as simple as an emotion and
Mm,
maybe even a negative emotion. So maybe you're getting ready to have a holiday interaction with a family member that maybe really gets under your skin, maybe always says something inappropriate, maybe an in-law, maybe a cousin, whoever it might be, but we're going to have a lot of relationship stress. Politics, that's going to come up a lot probably. And most families aren't all on one side of the aisle. So we have a lot of interaction there back and forth. And so, acknowledging how stress manifests in your physical body, I think is the best mechanism to be acutely aware to it so that you can best know when is it appropriate to then engage in stress reduction behaviors that you enjoy, because not everybody wants to sit down and meditate for 20 minutes. Not everybody feels comfortable closing their eyes. Not everybody feels comfortable bending over and deep breathing and doing downward dog. Some people just need to turn their phone off and go for a walk. Some people just need to go read a book by themselves for pleasure. Lots of different strategies, but I think acknowledging where in your body you feel stress. And so, stress in this physiologic way doesn't have anything to do with the external world. It has everything to do with you and your reaction. And when we look around the room, especially look around the room at our families, it's pretty easy to tell who is well adjusted and who isn't, who is calm and who isn't. And so just check in with yourself. Am I breathing? Am I
mhm,
holding my breath? Am I clenching my teeth? Are my palms sweaty? Do I feel fidgety? Do I feel nervous? Do I touch my face every time somebody looks me in the eye? These little tiny nuanced things. Do I have a gut ache? Do I have
mhm,
heartburn? Do I feel fear? Do I feel anxiety?
mhm,
That's what anxiety is this kind of stress response in the body.
mhm,
So I think acknowledging what your signs of stress are and then practicing how do you undo it?
mm,
Because we can't change the external environment. We can only kind of control or sit with our internal environment. And that's the root of mindfulness, and a lot of different mindfulness teachings. But that is one of the most powerful tools to
mhm,
make sure that you have a healthy gut, even far more than what you decide to eat.
mhm,
Is right there is how you can learn to control that. And where the gut brain axis information gets really exciting for me is that by eating all these different healthy foods that we keep talking about, you actually grow beneficial types of bacteria in your body that actually make the neurotransmitter hormones that are very pharmaceutical drugs try to increase in your brain.
Yeah.
Serotonin, GABA, things like that. So again, your body, but it's up to us to acknowledge where to find it.
We lost you for a second there, Erika. You said something about the body. And
Oh,
then,
I said the body is always trying to find the state of balance, to
okay.
express joy. I don't have to be the most joyful, bouncing, bubbly person every day, but to be able to find joy again, and then
Mhm,
to be able to acknowledge that, like, I might feel sad today. I might need
mhm.
time for myself today, et cetera. But just creating space for all those things and then acknowledging where different stress signals manifest in the body is a really good clue to whether or not you need to do that work. And my guess is 100% of you do.
Yes. Well, a lot of what you just said there resonated with me as I'm working with women in peri and postmenopause, which adds another stress to the body. Menopause is a stress. There's changing hormones. The body's trying to figure out what the heck's going on here and responding to it. And then we add on other stressful life events and everything starts to accumulate. I want to pull out some of the things that you said that I think are going to be very important. One thing you mentioned, feeling feelings, being able to acknowledge, I feel fear. This is anxiety. I notice a lot of women don't even know sometimes. They don't feel right, but they don't know what it is. So giving that permission to feel that anxiety or feel that fear and know that it's okay to have those feelings. That is okay. And that's going to help you to help with the stress response. Did I understand that correctly?
Absolutely. um yeah, so sometimes, especially in early childhood, culturally, we weren't really allowed to feel. We weren't really allowed to emote. We were told to go to our room. We were told to stop crying. And so we've really conditioned ourselves to not feel things.
Mhm.
And so that's interesting. And it leads to a lot of confusion internally as well. So now that we're adults, now that we're feeling all these things, now that things are changing around us, we have an ability to start to almost reverse engineer our patterns, if you kind of follow what I'm saying. But yeah, so giving your body permission to feel things. And sometimes it might not even register to you that it is an emotion. You just might feel this muscle twitch in the right
Mhm.
lower back. You might feel this nervy kind of tingling pain in your right foot. So there might be bodily sensations,
Mhm.
in which case you're feeling these things. And then the longer you kind of focus on it, the more you realize, oh, like there is an emotion attached to that.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, another thing that I kind of practice is just, again, that active breathing. So
Mhm.
can I wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom, wash my face, whatever, and can I just consciously be aware of myself breathing that whole time,
Mhm.
letting my body run off, or my mind run off in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. I love that simple strategy of practicing your breath, of practicing focusing on your breath. Our breath is always with us, hopefully, and it's something that all of us take for granted. And I think it's a good reminder of how that breath just provides us life. Um, and
Um,
say that again?
said it's like a metronome.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy.
You keep the beat, you keep the pace, like it's the metronome of being grounded in your own body.
Mhm. And being able to practice that deep intentional breathing. A lot of times I have clients that will say, I can't, every time I try to deep breathe, then my mind wanders. And I try to encourage them that that's okay if your mind wanders. Can you bring it back to your breath or just acknowledge that your mind's wandering? Your mind is an active thing. It's going to wander. And by practicing the deep breathing, you can slow that mind down over time, but it does take consistency. Have you noticed that in your practice, Erica?
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's funny because there's some days when it's so much better than others. And it's so easy to feel like a failure if
Mhm.
It's like perfect meditation experience. But yeah, that's why I really like the work of Irene Lyon. I think I've mentioned her name,
Mhm.
before, but she's very much like an eyes open sensory experience kind of version of mindfulness. And she teaches mindfulness as a lifestyle. So you don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to be in a dark room. You don't have to sit up straight and be all rigid, but to actually use your five senses to be really aware of your body.
Mm. No, that's great. It's something that's so welcoming. And just like we've talked about, not all strategies are going to work for everyone. Finding your mindfulness strategy that might work for you, or your stress management strategy. So, like you said, maybe it isn't deep breathing or mindfulness. It's going for a walk. It's making time for yourself. It's reading a book. It's knitting, things that bring you joy, that pleasure and joy piece. Especially as we go into the holidays, they really are supposed to be that time. The intention of holidays was to be celebratory, and not this time of family dynamics or conflict, which can take things in a different direction. So, how can you find these joy for you over the holidays? Something that's important and impacts your microbiome, and that might be something that not many people think about.
Yes, yes.
Um, Well, as we're thinking, we've mentioned a bunch of different strategies. What do you think about putting together like a toolkit for our listeners as they're going into the holidays? What are some things that they can arm themselves with, recognizing not everyone's going to need everything, but there are things that you can draw on? Hopefully, if you're listening to this before the holidays, that will be helpful in terms of planning ahead. So you have your toolkit available, you have a game plan, and maybe you need to use it, maybe you don't, but at least it's there.
I would say I would put exercise at number one because that is maybe your alone time, but I love how exercise is it's like stress training
Mhm.
in a really controlled environment because as we're running or jogging or whatever we might be doing, but you get those same endorphins kind of release that also come on with stress, but you don't get the significant cortisol response. So you
Mhm.
get all the good things of stress, but you don't get all necessarily the bad things of stress. And so I think that that is really helpful because it keeps your body moving for one, so you're
Mhm.
better apt to maintain that energy balance in the body and to not feel stagnant. But also it's really, really good for stress reduction. And then if you I mean, I hope you're all exercising. Maybe you're not, but maybe even just going for a walk, right? But
Mhm.
getting that fresh air, going outside, creating that time, like that can be so incredibly grounding. And when you're on holiday, we're not going to work. We should have all the time in the world to do these things. So I really encourage you to do that and put that as kind of number one commitment to yourself as your toolkit to help you and help your gut microbiome through the holiday season. Number two, it would be start each day with a good meal. And what I mean by good is I mean, let's do a really balanced meal. If you like eggs for breakfast, great. If you like animal products for breakfast, that's fine. But let's add some greens in there. Let's add some broccoli. Let's make sure that we're getting at least some vegetables, and we're kind of being mindful of our uh, simple carbohydrate consumption. And by when I say simple, I mean really to kind of set yourself straight and to avoid like unnecessary sugar cravings and food cravings throughout the day. If you can start your day with a really balanced, healthy amount of protein, I like to go from 15 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast, which can sometimes feel like a lot, but when we feed ourselves again healthy protein, healthy fiber, healthy antioxidants, we feel fed, we feel nourished, we're set, and we can just carry on about the rest of our day. And there's a practice of eating that is incredibly grounding and nourishing. And it's just check the box. Need is met. And when we have our needs met, we're much less likely to react to other people's dramas, to look and search for all these other ways to lift us up. So, exercise, healthy breakfast, I think that should be key every day. Do something like that. And again, I know some people like intermittent fasting. I also like it a little bit. So, first meal of the day, I don't care when it is, but that'll be breakfast, and just make sure that, that's a good one. And then when you're thinking about holiday food, just try to embellish it. Even if you're doing stuffing, you can make stuffing a little bit sexier for your gut microbiome by putting some lentils or beans in there.
Mhm.
And I think you can still match all the same flavor profiles, but
Mhm.
try to look for ways to add beans, to add legumes, to add lentils, to add deep, dark leafy greens, to add a variety of mushrooms, to add a variety of olives. Use as many whole foods as you can to create these recipes, because our bodies and our gut microbiome love natural food.
Awesome.
They
Those
just
are great suggestions. Yeah, and I love there's also a lot of room within those to find what works for you and to experiment. So if you are going to be doing more traveling, or your holiday schedule does feel stressful and you feel like, oh, how am I going to keep up with my exercise routine? Can you find another way to move? So maybe it's not the exact routine that you're doing right now, if that doesn't feel realistic or you're not going to have the access. But can you find another way? Even movement of just walking can be beneficial, so that you're, like Erika mentioned, keeping that energy flowing through your body.
An exercise that I think is very underrated is getting up and down off the floor without your hands.
And can be challenging. Yeah.
Without your hands, like that, you're like a black belt if you can do that. Most
Mhm.
of my people I work with, they can't even get up and down off the ground without a lot of extra help. So literally, if we don't use it, we lose it. And so many cultures around the world eat sitting on the floor. They don't
Mhm.
sleep in beds. They don't really sit in chairs, right? They're so active and in their natural environment. So I think it's very underrated. But if we can simply get down off the floor, lie down, even roll over, use your arms, whatever you need to do, but getting up and down off the floor, if you get up and down off the floor 50 times, I think you'll be sore. I really.
Yeah, that could definitely be quite a workout, especially without your hand. So maybe start with the couch nearby and work up to no hands. Start with one hand, but certainly great ways to just move your body in new and different ways. And if you are traveling, perhaps there's other areas you can explore, whether it's a new neighborhood to walk around, new hiking trails, parks, things that you can be outside, socially distanced, mask if you need it, and be able to still get that fresh air and movement in your body as a part of your day, which is a great recommendation. And then just that starting off your day with a meal that has a variety of nutrients, whatever time that might be. Maybe you're sleeping in a little bit more if you don't have to be working, and sleep's also important too. But starting that day off with a variety of things, and then taking that into your holiday meals. Don't be scared to experiment. Try something new. Whether if you're more comfortable with recipes, just put the into the Google search lentil stuffing and see what comes up. If you're like myself and really have trouble following recipes and you just want to throw things in, I always think that the worst things that can happen is you learn you don't want to make it again. So lots of opportunities to get creative and share that with the families that you're or the individuals that you're spending the holidays with.
Absolutely.
Any other suggestions as we close here, Erica? Just some things for us to think about as we go into the holidays, or closing remarks that you have on the gut microbiome and holiday seasons, and stress, especially.
Yeah. Well, what was just coming to mind is something that I said, I think the very first time that I was a guest speaker with you guys. And that is this idea of creating a five-star hotel within your body. So it's okay to feel luxurious, right? And when we think about luxury, we think about high quality, we think about really only feeding yourself the best that you can afford, right? And I say afford because I'm trying not to use money metaphors, because I really do think that being healthy doesn't need to cost a lot of money. Um, our access to being outdoors cannot be understated. And even if you are in a city, go to a city park, really get around trees, get around soil. The University of Oregon, which is just, 30 minutes south of here, in Eugene. They published a study, I think it was in 2015, but they looked at what happens in a white room when a person is in there. They flash some sort of fancy camera, and then they flashed the camera again after the person had been out of the room. And they were able to see a cloud. They called it the microbiome cloud. And it's funny because I don't know, we kind of live in a hippy dippy place and there's a lot of aura,
Mhm.
things like that. But it's like, I don't know, I kind of got goosebumps when I read this study because I was like, the microbiome is your aura. And I really excited. And that exchange. So this like cloud of microorganisms that lives around us, it lives on every living thing to some extent. And really diversity can also be expanded upon by how you interact with your environment, not
Mhm.
only yourself and what you're eating and things like that, but how you're actually interacting with your environment. That cloud can be visible on these fancy cameras that the university had for up to a minute, like I think it was 5 or 6 minutes after the person left.
Wow,
Yeah, pretty cool.
that's incredible.
So,
Yeah.
honor yourself. And I know there's so many different religions and cultures around the world that really describe your body as a temple. It really is a really magical place. And, you are home to a lot of different things. And I hope that you find home for yourself within your own body. And that's probably a whole other topic. But, being body aware and also feeling really comfortable in your body, which can take practice and a whole lot of therapy for some people, but um that balance and that connection there is really kind of at the crux with all these different microbial interactions as well.
Awesome. And such a great thing to think about as we go into the holidays, and where you're feeling in your body, noticing the feelings and sensations that come up, looking to create that 5-star hotel and enjoying yourself. So by all means, if there's prepackaged cookies or homemade cakes and pies and wine and beer, enjoy yourself, find the joy in that, and remember that balance piece of, can you find joy in a lesser amount perhaps than you have in the past, or just being mindful of what aspects of the whole experience bring you joy, in addition to some of these foods and drinks you might also incorporate.
Yeah, and I think, it took me a little while to get there. But once I learned about nutrition and once I learned about the power of an antioxidant to totally undo and reverse DNA damage, I got pretty excited about food. And then you layered on the effects of the gut microbiome and how they interact not only with the food, it made me less worried about the things I shouldn't do.
Hmm.
And it made me more excited about all the things I can do.
Hmm.
And my mom makes this comment every time she comes to visit me. I eat so much when I come visit you. And yet I go home and I weigh 5 pounds less. And I'm like, well, that's because I'm feeding you a lot of really good food, healthy food. And that doesn't mean we don't have wine. It doesn't mean we don't have treats, right? It's just when you feed your body the right stuff, it's like your body decides what it can let go of and what it wants to hang on to.
Hmm.
And in my patient population, again, morbid obesity, my poor patients are so conflicted that they feel hungry all the time, but it's also because they aren't getting any micronutrients. So, what are we hungry for? What is your body hungry for? And hopefully by listening to podcasts like this and being coached by people like Stacy, you're going to learn that your body's not hungry for calories and shame. Your
Mm.
body's hungry for nutrients and love and safety and security. And now that you know why this stuff is important, at least my hope for everyone is that then they can be empowered to make those choices for themselves.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erica. If any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is your website that they can learn more about what you're doing and reach out to you?
Yeah. So I am at lavellayourguts.com. It's a little play on love your guts, because I think that's really important. But yeah, Lavella, Lavella, yourguts.com. And on there is a link where you can get in contact with me. And anybody who's ever written me, I have replied to. So I'm really excited to connect with anyone who wants to connect with me.
So, well, thank you so much, Erika. And if you're interested in working with one of our registered dietitians around any of these things that we've talked about today, so improving your gut microbiome, experimenting with adding more plants to your current nutrition, or even on the stress management and exercise side, we are here for you at Genève to support you through that with our Health Fix program. And we also have a telemedicine program as well, where our OBGYNs and naturopathic doctors who are trained in menopause can support you through telemedicine calls. So this can be anything from specific symptoms that you have concerns about, questions about. They are able to prescribe HRT and some other prescriptions, but they're also there just to answer questions. And a lot of clients find it very helpful to just have someone give them information about what options they have available. And that's what we want to do at Genève, is really empower you, like Erika mentioned, to have the knowledge so you can make the decision about your health that you feel is best for you. So thank you for your time today, and hopefully this was informative, and we'll be back again next month with another microbiome and menopause podcast and video.